Hello and welcome to the June coffee tasting subscription coffee tasting video, that's what we call it, where I'm tasting the 3 coffees we're sending out to all our subscribers around the world. If you don't know what a coffee subscription is, it means that we send out coffee to you every first Wednesday of the month. I actually pick the coffees, so we have 3 different coffees normally, but you can subscribe from 1 bag to 6 bags. So for instance, if you subscribe to 5 bags, you will get 1 of each, and then extra bag of the first and the second coffee, for instance. Now you can pause and stop, upgrade and downgrade the subscription at any time. Yeah, that's about it. We make these videos every month so that you can taste the coffees together with me if you want to. And if you only subscribe to 1 coffee, I highly recommend tasting it next to something else, just to, teach yourself how to describe flavor a little bit more easily. I always find it more easy when I have something to compare with. And if you want to set up a cupping like this, we have a tutorial for that in our YouTube channel or website. So you can also check that out. It's pretty simple and everyone can do it. Basically, you need a spoon, some water, some cups and a coffee grinder. I assume you already have a coffee grinder since you're subscribing to our coffee. Cool. As you may see, it's June. Well, you can't see on my t-shirt, but we are sending out coffees from Finca Tamana. And this is maybe the closest to my heart project over time, because I spend a lot of time at Finca Tamana. I was just there in March, spent 2 weeks there, because when I stay at Tamana, I work on my own farm, which is Finca El Suelo, which is right next doors. Finca El Suelo used to be part of Tamana, but that's my farm. We're not producing a lot of coffee. Tamana is Elias and Bellanid's farm, and they are producing quite a lot of coffee. And we have been working very closely with them since 2012 in order to improve the quality of the coffee. And one way to do that is to work with the process. We have, of course, perfected the process that they're doing over time. They are washing all their coffees that we are buying, but now they have installed a new wet mill, which means they are fermenting coffee in steel tanks. They are washing the coffee with a mechanical demucilage remover after fermentation. We are soaking the coffee to remove all the mucilage, and then we're drying the coffee on raised beds on the shade for a long time to make sure the shelf life is there, so the coffee tastes fresh for a really, really long time. We also store the coffee in grain pro bags, which means airtight bags before it's exported, and that just prolongs the shelf life and makes the coffee taste really super fresh. So all this kind of work has made the coffee clean, sweet, taste fresh for a long time. But we are not really changing the flavor of the coffee that much. So the only way to do that is to plant different varieties on the farm. And we have been doing that for many years, and now we're sending out 3 different ones for you to try. They are very, very different in flavor. So even if you are not a very good coffee taster or used to tasting a lot of coffees, I'm 100% sure that you will be able to taste the difference in these 3 cultivars. So all 3 cultivars are grown on the same farm, the same process, everything. The only difference is the trees that they're growing are different. So just like you have apples, you have yellow apples, red apples, green apples, you have many different types of red apples. They taste different. That's the same with coffee. And these are all Arabica coffees, but they are very, very distinct in flavor, I have to say. So you might see this t-shirt. This is a t-shirt that we call Tamana because these are some of the cultivars that they grow at Tamana. You can get that in our web shop if you want one, but I wanted to wear it so that you can see the names of the cultivars we're sending out. So let's start with the first one that we're sending out to all the subscribers. And this coffee is something on its own. It's a variety that they called Caturron. Caturron. I don't know what it means, but it is what I hear, at least when I'm in Colombia. I mean, this is not a very well-known variety outside of Colombia. But from what I hear, it was a cultivar variety that was discovered in Acevedo, in Huila. And it is quite distinct in its morphology. The tree looked different than the traditional Caturra and Castillo in Variedad, Colombia. The beans are a bit longer and larger. The tree is more resistant against leaf rust. And the smell of the cherry when you depulp it, and also the taste of the coffee is super distinct. Now this coffee for me, it's very, very herbal, but not in a negative way. It also has a lot of fruit flavor that Diego, my good friend and World Barista champion also, he describes as really super ripe papaya. And I kind of agree with him. I call this fruit flavor Caturron flavor because it's so distinct. So it's kind of very, very herbal and also very fruity at the same time. The acidity is a little bit winey, like when you drink wine. The fruit is like full on, and also the herbalness. So very, very distinct coffee and quite easy to separate from the other ones. Now, Elias has planted quite a lot of this cultivar because when we started tasting it, he just started with some trees on the farm. We started tasting it. I really enjoyed this coffee. It was so distinct and so different from the other coffees. I remember we brought it to an exporter to cup it there. And all the exporters said, oh, this is a fermented coffee, or this has a fermenty effect or something. And I said, no, it's not even fermented for a very long time. We just washed it and everything. And then they didn't believe me. I knew it because I knew how the coffee was processed and picked and everything. And then the next year we brought the same coffee. We made sure that it was not over fermented or anything, the same characteristics. And the exporters were like, this is a very interesting coffee. It is a very interesting coffee because it's so different. And especially at Finca Tamana, when they process so well, you get a lot of sweetness and this super distinct and clean flavors of papaya, herbals, a little bit wininess. Yeah. I really hope you enjoy that. Let me know in the comments below if you don't enjoy it or if you really love it. I think it's really fun to discuss this coffee because I have some people, you know, the guys upstairs, some of them were scoring it over 90 points. Some were scoring it in the low 80s. So it's a kind of a split and divide coffee, just like maybe a natural can be sometimes. But for me, this is super clean coffee and super interesting. And if you don't mind a little bit of herbalness, I love this coffee. Cool. Now the second coffee is actually a mix of different varieties. That's just because Elias has planted, I think now, over 20 different varieties on the farm. And some of them are not producing a lot of coffee. So when I was there last year and cupping through all the different pickings and harvests, I think we ran through between 80 and 100 samples altogether. And some of them are like really, really small volumes. It can be like 60 kilos, 40 kilos. And the coffees are really good, so I didn't want to kind of not buy them. So we decided to mix them together because the problem is when you send it to the dry mill, it can be hard to kind of process the coffee there and clean the coffee and pack it for export if the volumes are too small. Because these dry mills are normally made for bigger volumes. So we don't have yet a small enough dry mill to do like 30 kilo lots in Colombia. Hopefully we will find one soon because my own farm is producing very small quantities and it's a little bit time consuming to mill them by hand. So instead of kind of disregarding this coffee, we decided to mix them together, make a nice blend. So the second coffee we're sending out is a mix of Java, Geisha, SL28, some Typica, and Sidra, and I think that's it. So a mix of different varieties. We will just call it varieties or varietales in Spanish on the bag. But the flavors are very, very nice. So when you hear the words SL28, Geisha, you can always assume fruity and floral coffees. And of course, there might be a little bit of cup variation here because it's a mix of different varieties. So maybe in one cup that you make, you'll get a little bit more Geisha beans, and the other one you'll get a little bit more SL28 beans, who knows. But in general, this coffee is very, very fruity, quite floral, and very delicate. A little bit more tea-like. And I get some red fruits and some really nice florals there. Now we have sent out SL28 before from Tamana and had bought quite a lot of it, but actually Elias stumped the trees, I think it was 1.5 years ago. And now some of the trees actually didn't grow back, so we had to reimplant a little bit. So that's why most of these varieties are producing not a lot of coffee. The Geisha is quite new. We have been cupping his Geisha before and it didn't really taste great, so we actually disregarded that Geisha and planted some other Geisha in a shaded area on the farm. And that's the Geisha we're tasting now. That is a little bit more distinct, especially when I cup them, alone, not blended. It's more distinct than it used to be. So this is kind of a work in progress, and I thought it would be really fun to share this kind of variety mix with everyone, just so that you have some kind of idea of what is to come from Finca Tamana, because we are starting now to get a lot of different flavors on the farm, and that means more fun and more delicious coffees for everyone. Let me just taste this one more time. Yeah, super nice. Now the last coffee we're sending out, the third bag, is a Castillo cultivar. It's what we call Castillo Tambo. It's the Castillo cultivar that was developed in Tambo. I think that's in Cauca or Nariño. I don't remember 100%. Basically, Colombia, the Cafe, the Colombian Coffee Federation's Institute for Research, they have developed Castillo as a further development from Variedad Colombia. Variedad Colombia is a crossing between Híbrido de Timor and Caturra. So it's a resistant hybrid, and Castillo is kind of a later development of that crossing. What they have done is they created a multi-line cultivar, which means they take seeds from many different selections of this hybrid. They plant it, and then they select the best trees, and then they replant seeds from those and select, and so on. So it's kind of a multi-resistant hybrid, and also they have planted it in different areas in Colombia. So they have, for instance, a general one, which is a mix of all of them. Then they have one from Pueblo in the north, they have one from Tambo in the south, and so on. And they taste slightly different. You can actually see a little bit of difference on the beans as well. And in my experience, we, for instance, have Castillo Nariño on the farm. We have Castillo Tambo. We have the general Castillo. Castillo Tambo is, for me at least, the better tasting one. It has a little bit more fruit flavor and a little bit more florality, but it's still, a very traditional Colombian flavored coffee, which means a lot of this kind of brown sugar, subtle red fruits, and a little bit of herbal twist, which is because it's a hybrid. It's quite a big-bodied coffee, quite powerful, and very sweet and intense, I have to say. Like, it's got intensity because it's strong, like the body is there, and especially compared to the variety mix, which is more delicate and tea-like, this is like a solid, strong, sweet, nice coffee. Yeah, let's taste the variety. It's like drinking floral tea, and this is like dark chocolate, like baking chocolate and fruit. Really nice. And then the Caturron. Papaya. Papaya and herbals. Jesus, that is so distinct. Cool, so 3 different coffees from Finca Tamana. The first one, Caturron. The second one, a mix of varieties. And the last one, Castillo Tambo, that we're sending out first Wednesday of June to all our subscribers around the world. I really hope you enjoy these coffees as much as I do. I think Tamana last year had a fantastic season, and the coffees are tasting phenomenal from this farm. So yeah, hope you enjoy them, and see you next time. Ciao, ciao.